This is Professor DePaulo. Welcome you back to Psych 265, fully online. And today I'm going to be talking about how to write the introduction section of the APA Manuscript. So, as I mentioned previously, we're going to run a study on factors related to COVID. So, related to COVID, following COVID-related behavior that supposedly will stem the spread of the virus. So things like wearing a mask, things like social distancing. Now I know you may say again, well, COVID's done, it's over. However, these are still important things to look at for the future because we didn't do a good job this time with COVID. Next time it could be 10 times worse. You could have a disease that's much more fatal, and if we follow or ignore the guidance like we did this time, we can end up with millions of people dead. And that's unfortunately the truth. So it's still a very important question to ask, like why do some people follow the directions and why do some people don't follow the directions? And the conspiracy theories and different things out there. So we're studying that. And to do background research on that, that's what we're going to be doing this week and talking about how to write the introduction section. So if we go into assignments, we want to write the introduction of an APA manuscript. So let's look at the instructions I have put up for you. So I want this introduction in total to be 8 paragraphs long. Okay. So in the first 2 paragraphs, we're going to define the problem and why the problem is important. So what are we studying, which is behavior related to COVID, and why is it important? Well, because we just lived through a pandemic and we watched many people die. And we didn't handle it very well. And this is also important for the future in terms of we don't want to make the same mistakes. So how will we do things differently moving forward? Because if you think this is the last pandemic, I'm sorry to say it's probably not. And it's probably going to be less than 100 years for another pandemic. We just typically forget all the different issues we've dealt with over the past because, they happened 40, 50 years ago. Take, for instance, smallpox. Smallpox was a serious concern until the 1970s. And it was very contagious and deadly. And I'm not saying we're going to get smallpox back, but we don't know what's in store. And we're liable to make the same mistakes. So why is this problem important? Well, those are all kind of reasons why. COVID's affected all of us. It's killed many people. People haven't been as responsive to the advice or following the guidance, and I understand. People are tired of it. It's over. I mean, I've been hearing people say it's over for years. Well, it's over, yet people are still dying. So it might be over for you. It's not over for everybody. And we still have to use common sense. So that's defining the problem. 2 paragraphs. What's the problem? What are we studying? COVID-related health behavior. And why is it important to study it? And I think I laid out in general terms why it's important to study. Go find research on it. Why is COVID important to study? Some of the reasons I said, some of your own reasons. Find some research on it that sort of speculates the same things or different things and put that in your first 2 paragraphs. Now, when you're finding research, you always have to cite what you're borrowing. So we want to paraphrase, which is put it in your own words, and then give credit to the author or authors that you're borrowing from. And that credit is called an in-text citation. An in-text citation is going to be something followed by a parentheses, author, year. So COVID has been a deadly pandemic for the past 3 years. Let's say that was borrowed from an article. Before the period, we'd write the author. Let's say there's a bunch of authors, et al. Means and others, comma, the year. That is called an in-text citation. So whenever you paraphrase and you're borrowing from some other article, now I'd rather not write 3 like this. I'd rather write it out, because numbers less than 10 I'd prefer to write out. Also, numbers starting the sentence I prefer to spell out. So COVID has been a deadly pandemic, and obviously the COVID's kind of a vague way of saying COVID-19 has been a deadly pandemic for the past 3 years. Yes, that's true. We all agree with that. But where did you get that information? Is that common knowledge? Yeah. Maybe, maybe not. But to be on the safe side, I would cite it from some article. Now, you don't have to cite every sentence. But if you're talking about something in a paragraph and you're borrowing information, make sure you cite at least in that paragraph. And I prefer to cite, whatever I'm borrowing, I prefer to cite it immediately. So like if the first sentence is borrowed and I'm referencing something, I want to cite it immediately. Author, comma, date, comma, year, like I have here. And then if I'm changing sources in the same paragraph, I'm going to then cite the new source. If the rest of the paragraph is the same source, Smith et al. 2022, for instance, I'm going to leave it alone. And then when I write my second paragraph, and if I'm borrowing, I'm going to cite again. So what I'm saying is you don't have to cite every sentence. If everything in the first paragraph is being borrowed from the same source, Smith et al. 2022, you just have to cite it once. And then if you change sources, you're going to have to cite the new source. Right? But if it's the same source, you only have to cite it once. I don't want you citing every sentence. But you have to cite at least, at minimum, once in each paragraph. Now, with the exception of the 8th paragraph, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But for the first 7 paragraphs, you want to cite at least once per paragraph. So those first 2 paragraphs, what is the problem? Why is it important? I kind of went through that already. Paragraphs 3 through 7 is the literature review. So this is when you're going to find articles and cite those articles. Those first 2 paragraphs are just kind of this vague general introduction. And now we're getting more specific. So I want you to cite more in paragraphs 3 to 7. So you want to find one article for each of these 5 hypotheses I have listed here. So empathy will be positively correlated with mask wearing. I want to find an article on that. People receiving vaccine will be more empathetic than or empathic than those not receiving the vaccine. Find an article related to that. Health anxiety will be positively correlated with fear of future pandemics. Find an article related to that. People who have lost family and friends to COVID will have higher levels of depression and generalized anxiety. Find an article that relates to that. And attachment anxiety will be positively correlated with the desire of family and friends to be vaccinated. Find an article for that one. So now, the articles may not be exactly on these 5 hypotheses. But they have to be related to these 5 hypotheses. And I want you to have one article for each of these 5 hypotheses. Okay, so paragraph 3 is going to be an article related to this first hypothesis about empathy. Paragraph 4 is going to be about the second hypothesis. Paragraph 5 is going to be the third hypothesis. Paragraph 6, the fourth hypothesis. Paragraph 7, the fifth. Paragraph 8, all you have to say is in the current study, the following hypotheses are tested, and then list out, not list like 1 through 5, but write in a paragraph form these 5 hypotheses. Right, so people receiving, don't list it A, B, C, D, and E. Write it as a paragraph, but state all 5 of those hypotheses. That's the only thing you're going to put in paragraph 8. So once again, 2 paragraphs introducing the problem, the study, the topic of the study, which is COVID and health behaviors related to COVID, and compliance to COVID related policies, right? What's the topic? Which I just said what it is, and why is it important? Those are the first two paragraphs. Then paragraph 3, an article that deals with empathy correlated with mask wearing. Paragraph 4, an article dealing with COVID vaccine and empathy. Paragraph 5, an article dealing with health anxiety and future pandemics. Paragraph 6, an article about depression and generalized anxiety to people that have lost family and friends to COVID. An article, paragraph 7, an article related to attachment anxiety correlated with desire of family and friends to be vaccinated. Doesn't have to be exactly on that, but it has to be related as closely as possible. So how are you going to find these 5 articles? So you need a minimum here of 5 articles, one for each of the 5 hypotheses. And if you want to use an article in the first 2 paragraphs, if you want to cite there, you're going to add that. That's going to be an additional article or 2. You don't need the articles for the first 2 paragraphs, but if you feel it makes your paper stronger, then add it. If you're borrowing from somebody else, then of course you have to cite it. So let's see how we're going to find research on these hypotheses. So there's 2 ways that I generally do it. One is Google Scholar and one is PsycInfo. PsycInfo is available through the library. So let's do that. We're going to go to the BMCC library. And we're going to find articles. If I can actually get the BMCC homepage to load. It's very, very slow. Okay, so we want the library. So you see at the top here, it says library. Click on that top part that says library. If you go to databases, it says database by subject. You want to go down to psychology. And then we want PsycInfo or Psych article. So here's the DSM, in case you want that for whatever reason. You don't really need it for this paper. But if you want to look at the DSM, it's there. Psych articles and PsycInfo are the 2 databases we generally use. I'm going to use PsycInfo just because I use this more often. But Psych articles is going to be very helpful as well. They're very similar. So let's go to PsycInfo. It's going to ask me to log in. So I logged in. Put your, I think it's your CUNY first password and log in. So now you're going to type in what you're looking for. Let's say empathy and mask wearing. And there's a lot of articles here on this. Empathy and mask. It's a very popular. A lot of people have written stuff on the link between empathy and mask wearing during COVID. You want to really look for articles that our library has. So when it says find it at CUNY, this will try to find it for you. But it's not guaranteed to have it. So the CUNY library, or the BMCC library, does not have all the articles because they have to pay for subscriptions to each of the journals, and those can be very expensive. So we have some articles and not others. Now you can get articles through, if you want, interlibrary loan, but the problem is that it's going to take a while. And so if you're doing research on your own in the future and you need a certain article from a journal that we do not have access to, I would say definitely do interlibrary loan. But for this class, it's not needed because it's going to take a while. It's not going to be like 24 hours. It might take a couple days. And you want to be writing this introduction. So don't wait for the articles. If they don't have an article, find a different one that the CUNY library system has. I don't know if they're going to have this first one here. And I'm looking for it. Oh, they do have it. Okay. So they have it. So click on Find It at CUNY, but you're not you're not guaranteed, but hopefully most of what you're looking for will actually have in the library system. Let me see if they have the second one. And they do. Great. So I'm pleasantly surprised because, we don't have every journal, but this could be something you're interested in. This article right here, Unmasking the Psychology of Recognizing Emotions in People Wearing Masking. This is about facial expression. It's not really about COVID and pandemic, right? So this article is about the pandemic. Here's another article about the pandemic, and I'm more interested in articles about the pandemic rather than this is about autism, which is important, but it's not really related to our research study. So let me just find this one. Now I know this one has it because it's already listed a PDF. So I can just click the PDF and I get the whole article. Compassion, empathy with pro-social behaviors and attitudes in a pandemic. That's exactly something I'm looking for. This is an online journal, very well-known online journal called PLOS ONE. And so if you want to use this article, the first thing you want to do is read the abstract if you're considering using this article. If you read the abstract, that sounds like, hey, this is something that will work with our study, the class study, then you're going to use it. You're going to cite this article. You're going to talk about the study here. So this is Carnes, Belletier, and Bloss, 2022. So if I were to use this article, let's get rid of this one. This is the one I made up as an example. Let's write the real one here. Carnes. Spelling is always a challenge. Belletier and Bloss. That's right. 2022. Demonstrated the link. Demonstrate a link between, or a correlation. Doesn't matter. I'm just paraphrasing in my head right now. Between empathy and pro-social behaviors during the COVID. Oh, make sure you got spell check on. And I've cited it. Now I could have cited it. I could have cited the authors at the end of the paragraph or at the end of the sentence, but I started the sentence with them because I'm introducing this article that I'm talking about. Carnes, Belletier, and Bloss. So that's a proper citation. I don't need the parentheses to start the sentence. So you never put a parentheses at the beginning of the sentence. So if you're starting the sentence with a citation like this, you put the authors and then parentheses the year. You don't need to put the whole thing in parentheses because you don't start a paragraph or a sentence with a parentheses. If you're putting these authors at the end of a sentence, then you put the parentheses and the whole citation like I showed you in the first example. And now talk about this article. If you're going to talk about this article, you want to make sure you read through the whole thing, focus on the introduction, focus on the method. Don't worry too much about the results and the statistics because some of this might be a little bit confusing to you, but then focus on the discussion, which is starting after the results here. And there's lots of confidence intervals and things like this. You may not understand what a confidence interval is, so don't worry about that. Go right to the discussion. Now, at the beginning of the discussion, in this first paragraph, first paragraph or two, they're going to summarize the results. So, what they find, participants with more compassion or more likely to have stayed home to protect others from getting sick in the past 2 weeks and spent more time staying home, keeping distance from others, and wearing masks in public. That's what they found. So they have established the relationship between empathy and this pro-social behavior or health-related behavior for COVID. And that's widely supported in other articles. So a lot of the literature is about if you have empathy, high levels of empathy, you're going to wear that mask, you're going to stay away from people, you're going to take things seriously, COVID seriously, because you don't want to make somebody else sick or possibly kill them because you care about people. If you don't have as much empathy, then you're more caring about yourself. I want to have a good time. I want to live my life. And, well, people just have to deal with it. Whatever happens, happens. I'm going to live my life. And there was a lot of that going on. I want to live my life. Nothing's going to stop me. I don't care. And people that did that, some of them got away with it. Some of them got themselves sick, which they probably don't care about. But how do you know if you live that kind of reckless life? And I'm talking about like during the peak of the pandemic. I'm not talking about like later on. I'm talking about like when it first happened. There were people that were just, I want to live my life. I'm not staying home. I'm going to be around people. I'm going to go out to the bar. I'm going to go out partying. And those people could have gotten others, that they don't even know infected. And it could have caused damage to other people that they don't even know about. I would say that would constitute someone that's lacking empathy. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person. That doesn't mean you don't have compassion for sick people. What that means is you can't take another person's perspective and sort of put yourself in their shoes and say, would I really want to do this to somebody? How would they feel? How, if something happened to them, how would they feel? Would you want to be in that situation? So this is the first hypothesis. This is an article related to it. And if you give a summary of this article in paragraph 3, that's all I'm looking for. And you're going to do the same thing with hypothesis 2. You're going to find an article and you're going to summarize it, and that's going to be paragraph 4. Right? And then hypothesis 3 is going to be paragraph 5. Hypothesis 4 is going to be paragraph 6. Hypothesis 5 is going to be paragraph 7. And then the final paragraph will be just basically all those 5 hypotheses in a paragraph form, right, together. And that's all you have to do. Now, if you don't want to use PsycInfo, you can also use Google Scholar. So let's do Google Scholar. So if we're doing Google Scholar, let's do mask wearing or empathy and vaccination. How about that? Empathy and vaccination. Okay, here's an article. COVID-19 vaccine donations. Vaccine empathy or vaccine diplomacy. Information about herd immunity through vaccination and empathy. Let's see if these articles are related enough. So we can click on PDF, means that they have it. Not all of these results will have articles. Some of them will be behind a paywall. Do not, under any circumstance, pay for an article. There's plenty of free articles that you can find through Google Scholar and PsycInfo. Do not pay for anything. They'll say like, would you like to purchase the article if we don't have it or it's not free? Don't purchase anything. There's plenty of stuff that's free that will work for your paper. If they don't have the article, move on to something else. Let's just click on this PDF. See what it looks like. Here's the PDF. This is a pretty long abstract here. Vaccine inequality. Vaccine diplomacy. So this is talking about. Well, this is more about a nation. vaccine empathy and donations of vaccines. That's related, but it's not 100% where we're going with this. I'm not really interested in vaccine diplomacy. So we looked at the abstract, not so great. Let's look at this one. And this is a judgment call. You're going to read the abstract. You're going to determine, is this kind of, is this close enough? What I'm saying is, like, use your best judgment to determine, is the article related closely enough to the hypothesis. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you're starting out, so I understand that when you read an abstract, it's going to be different than when I'm reading an abstract. I understand that completely. But try to get an article that's related to the hypothesis that I've set out, those 5 hypotheses. As close as possible. Let's read this abstract here. It's kind of small, so I'm going to make it bigger. An effective vaccine against COVID stops the spread of the disease. However, vaccine hesitancy might hinder high uptake rates and undermine efforts to eliminate COVID once an effective vaccine became available. And this sentence is key, because this was the problem initially. The problem initially were people were afraid of the vaccine. Some people just were anti-vaxxer. They're not going to take the vaccine under any circumstance. But the general public, they were a little concerned. So in the initial vaccine uptake or vaccine received was a little bit slow at the beginning, and then it got better and better. And the whole idea is, to have 70 to 80% of the population vaccinated, because that will lead to herd immunity. So those 70, 80% of people will cover the 20 or 30% that are not going to be vaccinated. But you have to get to that 70, 80%. And so this was all about, what determines if people will actually take the vaccine. So this was 2315 participants from the United Kingdom. And the results are that there was a relationship with empathy. The motivations to get vaccinated against COVID was related to and could be causally promoted by both mere information about herd immunity and by empathy. So there is a link here, an article linking vaccine, getting vaccinated with empathy. If that's the article you want to use for that hypothesis, that's fine. There's plenty of other articles. You got thousands of articles. There's so many articles on this stuff over the last few years. This is basically what all the research was about. And I know that we're kind of burned out on it. We want to move on. But, as I said before, we want to find out as much as possible, even now, about why people did the things they did. And the problems that were caused by people not wearing masks, not getting vaccinated. And if you choose personally not to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But we need to know why. Because if we have too many people choosing not to get vaccinated and not to socially distance ourselves or not to do all these other things that we're asked to do, when it comes around again, which it will at some point, and a pandemic comes that's deadlier than COVID and spreads even easier than COVID, we're going to be in trouble. We were fortunate with COVID. I know that sounds kind of crazy to say we were fortunate because COVID was not good. But we were fortunate that the mortality rate was very small. It was not very high at all. And most people that died had pre-existing conditions, but a lot of people died. So we may say that the rate of the mortality rate is low, small, very low. Could be much worse, but that means nothing to people that know people that have died from COVID. And I know multiple people that have died from COVID. At the beginning, in the middle, towards the end. Unfortunately, I know many people. And it's not been good for their families. So what can we learn going forward? And that's kind of why I think this is important to do. And that's also the reason why I started doing this online and collecting data is, we didn't have access to the campus. So everything had to be migrated online, and then the topic of the day, of the year, of the millennium has been COVID. And I am more of a health psychologist, health/clinical. I'm more health clinical oriented. Those are my research interests. So COVID and stuff related to COVID is really interesting to me. So I would look through multiple articles for each hypothesis, and I would find an article that's the best or as closely related as possible. So that means 5 hypotheses, 5 articles. So first 2 paragraphs, introduction, to sort of introduce the topic, why this is important. Paragraph 3, hypothesis 1. Paragraph 4, hypothesis 2. Paragraph 5, hypothesis 3. Paragraph 6, hypothesis 4. Paragraph 7, hypothesis 5. And paragraph 8, you want to put all those 5 hypotheses in a paragraph. Not listed, but in paragraph form. And then you're done. How big those paragraphs are, that's up to you. I mean, the introduction should be several pages. I would say at least, 3 pages, if not more. But keep to the 8 paragraph structure that I give you, because I'm trying to make it organized for you. I'm trying to make your life easier. If you just write what you want to write, it's going to be not good. Most students cannot write a good introduction because they have no experience writing them. They're not publishing. And so I'm giving you a structure to help you learn the basics. If you just completely ignore that and decide, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to write my own introduction, you're probably not going to write a good introduction. So take some time and do the research and write a few pages from the introduction. It's difficult. It's different. But it's doable. And please follow the directions that I've given you. If you have questions, you can always email me. If you want to meet on Zoom, we can do that too. I'm happy to answer your questions. Now, when you're done with your paper, your 8 paragraph introduction, you're going to save it as a PDF and you're going to upload it right here where it says introduction. You're going to click on this link, upload your paper. This is under the assignments tab. Right, assignments. And you'll see the video here posted here. You don't see it right now, but it'll be posted here with the introduction. This is the written instructions I showed you. You'll have the video here, and then you'll have the upload link where it says introduction. Please submit the introduction. And then you're done. I mean, is it going to be like a perfect introduction? No, it's a rough draft. But you must make an effort. I want to see that you found articles. I want to see that you're citing correctly. You have to cite. I want to see if you follow the directions with the structure of the introduction. All of those things. Now, for the final paper, you're not going to write the word introduction as the title of your introduction section. Instead of writing the word introduction for your final paper, you're going to write the title of the manuscript. So the title of the manuscript will go at the top of your introduction section. For the rough draft, you can just write introduction, because we don't have a title of the manuscript yet. That's going to be done last. But what I do that for? I don't want to do that. I want to center this. You want to center this. The title of the manuscript will eventually go at the top of your introduction section. But for now, you can just write the word introduction in the center, and then start your 8 paragraphs. Save it as a PDF, submit it, and you're done. And hopefully I've given you sort of a hint at, using PsycInfo, using Google Scholar, finding articles, reading the abstract, and providing in-text citations. You do not need to use you do not need to make a reference page now. You're going to make the reference page later on. For now, you just need to provide the in-text citations in the introduction whenever you're referencing the articles that you found. And you must use a minimum of 5 articles for the introduction. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully that helps you write the introduction. If you have any questions, email. You can set up a meeting, whatever you want to do, whatever's easier for you. I'm trying to be as flexible as possible, but contact me. Make sure you do it on time. Do not wait to the end of the semester to do things. If you have a problem, I need to know about it as soon as possible. Don't just put things off and then come to me and say, I didn't do anything this semester. That's not a winning strategy. So please let me know if you have concerns or questions. I'm available. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Bye for now, and I will see you back for the method section.